childcare. I can't help to go back to 2003 when we first entered, given the privilege to govern in this province. We had to deal with a deficit. It was a hidden deficit, though. You know, just so you know, and I just want to remind the House. I know you know this. That since then we passed a law, so no government in the future can hide any deficit. But we also enter a very serious social deficit as well. Now, there has been serious downloading of previously provincial services to municipalities, and in the last 12 years, we've seen clawback from the federal government on childcare. So, if I would like, you know, I would love to see a comprehensive federal childcare strategy, which we haven't seen any. We have stepped up to the plate to compensate for some of those deficits the previous government left us, and especially when federal government came forward and clawed back on the childcare strategy that was previously introduced by the previous federal government. We stepped up the plate. I think it was $72 million that we have to fork out during those years. And when I look at this, and I want to point out that Bill 10 that we passed, once proclaimed, it will help to increase availability of licensed childcare, and even more, will provide additional incentive for home-based providers to join the licensed sector. So it's clear that we're not against anyone in the industry. We just want to make sure the quality of the service, the safety of the service is available to every Ontarian that need them. As a parent, I think it's as a parent and as an M.P.P, a representative of a great riding in the downtown Toronto, I think it's important for me to stand up and speak up for the kids and parents that they need for this service. And I want to again, you know, clear that the government recognized the roles of unlicensed childcare providers, and with Bill 10 being passed, once proclaimed, this act will continue to permit unlicensed childcare providers to care for our children. And I think that's a very good, very thoughtful measure in the act. And for that reason, I feel it's adequate, and I feel that I can support this motion because it does not address the issue of quality, availability, and accessibility. Thank you.
Further debate, the member from Thornhill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the member from Nepean Carleton is feeling a little bit better soon. She managed to give her talk on a sprained ankle. Keep her leg elevated. I just want to mention that I hear the struggle between rural ridings and urban ridings here in the House, and I think that, you know, the expression "walk a mile in my shoes," I think that is very hard for us. We're in downtown Toronto to imagine what it's like in a small community. Now, it doesn't have to be a rural community. It could just be a small community. And in many small communities, there are not enough children for a large licensed daycare. It could be that there's a fair number of people in the population, but there's not that many babies. All of a sudden, there's an influx of kids over a couple of years, and then it disappears again. You need to have a big center with a large population to have licensed, regulated, large centers that we think about when we think about large daycare centers here in Toronto. So it shouldn't be a struggle between large daycare centers, which I might mention are unionized centers, which is possible why you know, they have a stronger voice than the smaller centers, which are just struggling to take care of their families and take care of the neighborhood's families. I think that we have to focus on the fact that there's also the issue of choice. These home daycare centers are an extension of people's families. It's not just an industrial kind of setting. It's a small setting, and very often there's a flexibility in terms of when you pick up your kid and when you drop off the child. In the traffic, in an urban center, or in the distance travels, and with our winter storms and tough weather conditions, many families need and want those kind of flexible hours that a home daycare can provide that a large institutionalized, I'll call it, daycare cannot provide. Many people work flexible hours, they're in sales, they're often single parents, they don't have family nearby to help out and pick up kids or drop off kids. And I think that if we want to have a workforce so that we can kickstart our economy, then we have to help out those parents who need to have somebody available to look after their kids. I was at the Social Policy Committee, and I heard over and over from stakeholders that Bill 10 is going to dramatically reduce the ability for home daycares to provide childcare. We heard that by having all-day kindergarten, even though a lot of families count on it and love it, the fact is it reduced children from daycare settings, and proportionally it reduced kids from the larger centers, which often don't take kids under 18 months. Most parents have to return to the workforce before the child is 18 months, and I haven't heard what this government is suggesting in terms of providing daycare availability to those children who are under 18 months and need a daycare. I don't hear this government providing solutions for special needs kids who need to be in a smaller setting, in a home-like setting, with physical challenges, with emotional challenges, and I don't hear this government offering solutions for families who have transit issues. Most large daycare centers are not accessible for families who don't have cars or transit nearby. The small home daycare settings are often within communities, and it encourages walking, it encourages a healthy lifestyle, and it also encourages communities to get to know each other and to work better as a community. If your child, we all know of people who send their kids to schools with specialized programming or possibly independent schools. If your children are traveling a long distance to get to that school, chances are that they're not meeting children in their own neighborhood, and that's a struggle for many families. If families are sending their kids to independent faith-based schools, which I have a lot in my riding, Bill 10 is actually going to restrict those schools to be able to provide preschool programming and nursery program. So maybe some of these consequences are unintended, Mr. Speaker, but they are consequences nevertheless, and I haven't heard this government adequately explain and offer solutions for some of these consequences. I'd like to see some discussion on licensed versus illegal, because these home daycare centers might not be licensed, but they are perfectly legal centers. In my riding, very close, in fact, walking distance from my house, a little girl, Eva Rabakovich, died in an illegal home daycare that was reported on, and there were 2 or 3 reports to the ministry, and they weren't even acted on. 2 of the reports were not acted on, and now we see a $3.5 million lawsuit against the owners and operators, of course, but also against the Ministry of Education. Well, if this case is settled and the court decides that the Ministry of Education is liable, it's the taxpayers who are on the hook. Are we going to see a real concerted effort to make daycares safer for our children instead of just reducing choice and taking away parental rights from parents? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Ottawa Orleans.
Mr. President, and I'm proud to rise today to discuss an issue that is important to me, but also for the constituents of Ottawa Orleans. You know, this government on this side of the House, since 2003, have committed to ensuring that all Ontarian families have the ability to ensure their children get the best care and the best education available than almost any other jurisdiction in the world. And we should be proud of this, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite's motion, which we have addressed, I believe, in the House through Bill 10, the Child Care Modernization Act. Lorsque nous avons présenté le projet,
When we table Bill 10, we acknowledge that we would have to study the child care system in Ontario.
rising from certain sectors of the child care industry, and this government and all members would agree, we in that chamber have the higher level of duty to our youth and our children. And that's why, actually, we brought forward the Child Care Modernization Act, which after debate in this session and last session was passed with considerable say from all sides of the House and numerous stakeholders. Monsieur le Président, nous reconnaissons
Mr. Speaker, we recognize the importance of child care in Ontario and the importance that they have as an option for families.
that many sectors of child care has not been updated. In some cases, the regulation had not been updated in more than half a century. We needed to establish a modern framework that kept our children safe, but allowed the flexibility of unlicensed daycare to still serve the public. We respected the invaluable work that unlicensed child care operators provide while making sure that our children are safely looked after and receiving the appropriate amount of attention they need. Mr. Speaker, our new child care legislation has had years of input, and we've gone through considerable lengths to make our updated frameworks and regulation balance.
My colleague at the opposition has a good motion, but it's not a valid one, because we've done this within Bill 10.
To allow flexibility for independent child care providers. We've done that, Mr. Speaker, and done it with considerable input. And again, the member opposite has also motioned that the regulatory regime allows for a fairer distribution of inspection for child care case files. Yet again, we've done this. We have made sure that our inspectors are on the cases that need it, and those who violate regulation with the Act are the ones who garner the extra attention, while we do not needlessly disturb the good work of those who obey the law. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of our Bill 10, and I hope that all members today understand the hard work this government has done in addressing those concerns, and therefore will not be supporting the motion of the opposition. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
Thank you for the debate. The member for Leader and Bruce.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand in support of my colleague from M.P.P. Carleton. She's put a lot of thought out there. I'll start that one again. She has put a lot of thought into this particular situation, and she's reached out to a number of individuals that have been negatively impacted by the bill that came through last session, Bill 10. And in particular, I appreciate the fact that she again consults. This is something that we're seeing less and less of from this government, Speaker. I could go on with many examples such as neonics and carbon tax, but I want to focus in on something that's very important to this particular motion that my friend from M.P.P. Carleton has presented. Essentially, the Coalition of Child Care Providers Resource Network agrees with the proposed regulation to remove the requirement to care for a minimum of 3 children under the age of 3 years. IPCs have been caring for more than 3 children under the age of 3 for years, very successfully, I might add, Speaker, in terms of safe, high-quality, age-appropriate programs. But the limit of 2 children under the age of 2 is already causing parents and caregivers problems. They're seeing parents and caregivers literally in tears. A caregiver recently contacted the CCPRN and called stating she turned away 3 one-year-olds the previous day, and she said one of the moms actually burst into tears and stated she didn't know what she was going to do as she had to start work the next month. And the Coalition of Child Care Providers Resource Networks, they're suggesting that we're going to see more and more of this angst in the months to come. And I just want to share a personal perspective that independent caregivers typically become members of the family. When my husband was the primary caregiver for my 3 stepkids, two of the 3 of them were not in school. And if it wasn't for Mary, and if it wasn't for Audrey, and if it wasn't for his sister Elaine, he wouldn't have been able to confidently go to work every day knowing that his children were being well cared for. And this particular motion takes that into consideration. And for that, I almost called you by your name. I thank the member from Nepean Carleton, because we need to take into consideration that in rural Ontario, our conditions are very, very different. An individual may not have the resources or time to drive 20 minutes out of their village, off the farm, to get their kid to registered daycare, and then turn around and drive the opposite direction to get to work. They have totally, yet again, shown their disconnect with rural and northern and suburbia Ontario when it comes to daycare and quality care across this province. And there are also unintended consequences as well, Speaker, to what the Liberals have set up. In terms of Bill 10, we're seeing in this province of Ontario, some school boards have essentially frozen out independent providers, causing uncertain futures for these small businesses. And yet again, it's another example of Liberal government's total disregard for small business across this province.
Thank you. I now return to the member for Nepean Carleton. You have 2 minutes for a response.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It's my pleasure to respond to the debate today. I'm very happy that we had it. In fact, I'd like to have more debates on childcare quality.